really cool stuff, as with most of these presentations here. And what do you know, ladies and gentlemen, we are here at our very first panel. It is called Immuno Oncology, Harnessing the Human Body's Power to Battle Cancer. And let's welcome back Jason Kolbert from Dawson James. There he is. You did a fantastic job moderating the panel yesterday, sir.
Thank you.
And I'll let you have at it. This panel is going to be going for a little while, so let's have some good discussion here with the execs.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So the topic of today's panel is not COVID as it was yesterday. It is really immune oncology, or harnessing immunology to solve, to heal. That's really interesting because we have gone through a renaissance over the last decade in terms of how we look at treating cancer. And these companies are pioneering that in very different ways. And these companies are all, to me, very, very interesting because we're talking about market caps in the $250 to $500 million range. I'm going to come back to that. And we're going to come back to kind of what these companies do and how we should look at them in the landscape. So with that, I'm just going to go around and let's introduce each CEO. And as we discussed, your name, the name of the company, the ticker symbol, the market cap, and the cash on the balance sheet, and then come back to me. Then we're going to do 5 minutes on each company, and then we're going to go to an interactive Q&A format. So with that, Dr. Bedu-Addo, thank you very much for joining us. Take it away.
Well, thank you very much. I'm President and CEO of PDS Biotechnology, ticker symbol PDSB. PDS Biotechnology is a mid-clinical stage cancer immunotherapy company. The company has a market cap of about $450 million with no debt, and we reported approximately $75 million in cash as of our most recent filing.
Perfect. And next, let's follow up with Greenwich Lifesciences, recently public company, Snehal Patel. I was looking at Snehal's bio. It is very distinguished, MIT, University of Chicago. Clearly somebody who is well studied. I've been having a lot of dialogue with him over the last day and kind of understanding what Greenwich Lifesciences does. We'll get a little bit deeper into that. Let me turn it over to you, Snehal.
Thank you, Jason. My name is Snehal Patel. I'm the CEO of Greenwich Lifesciences, ticker GLSI. Our market cap has been between 500 and 600 million in the last few months, and we have 30 million in cash that we're committed towards our upcoming phase 3 clinical trial.
Okay, perfect. And let's turn it over to a company that I cover, CEO I've known for the last 15, 20 years, Dr. Lindsay Rosenwald. Lindsay, congratulations. You had some good news yesterday, and we'll give you a chance to just talk about that good news, but introduce us to who you are and Fortress.
Sure. Lindsay Rosenwald, CEO and president of Fortress Biotech. We have a market cap of about $330 million. We have several publicly traded subsidiaries. Our consolidated cash is about 270-something million. Fortress, without the public companies, is around 78 million as of the end of the second quarter.
Okay, perfect. And so here's a little exercise I did. Now, Lindsay, I did use consolidated cash as the numbers, and I did include the fact that there was a transaction yesterday that, and so I calculated the 68 million, I'm going to call it a non-dilutive capital that will come in. And I looked at the enterprise value. Why? Because I'm an analyst. And what I want to understand is, which of these companies is the cheapest company? And by the way, the worst way to do that is what I'm going to show you, because the numbers don't really tell you the story. You need to understand what the potential of the therapy is, where the therapy is, what the risks of the therapy are. But it is very interesting because we have a bunch of companies, $340 to $500 million market cap today. PDS Bio, 430, market cap, 75 million in cash, 355 enterprise value. Okay. Greenwich Lifesciences, 500 million market cap, 30 million in cash, 470 million enterprise value. Okay. Fortress Bio, 340 million market cap, 340 million in consolidated cash. Enterprise value is zero. So, sometimes when you look at these metrics, I'm just trying to understand which it might be the cheapest, right? And so it makes me kind of look at Fortress. Now, of course, I have some bias. I'm an analyst. I cover Fortress. Fortress is my top pick. It's a very interesting company, but it's also very risk diversified. But that's not why we're here today. Lindsay didn't ask me to say any of this. It's just what I see. We're here to talk about cancer immune therapy. And so what we want to understand is, what are these companies doing, and how does it fit into the cancer immunology landscape? So let me ask Dr. Addo to give us an introduction to exactly what he's doing at PDS Biotech. Dr. Addo.
So to give you a quick introduction, so as I mentioned, we are a mid-clinical stage cancer immunotherapy company, right? And so just taking a look at what we're doing with our platform Versamune technology. The goal here is to train the immune system to much more effectively recognize and attack cancer cells. So for example, although a small population of the first 18 patients in our most advanced phase 2 clinical trial, PDS Biotechnology, the NCI, National Cancer Institute, recently reported what may be some of the most significant clinical data generated to date in advanced, untreatable HPV cancer patients. So these previously untreatable patients had all failed chemotherapy treatment as well as radiation treatment. And among these patients, 67% of them had also failed treatment with the state-of-the-art checkpoint inhibitors such as Keytruda and Opdivo. Now, upon treatment with the National Cancer Institute-led phase 2 trial, clinical efficacy in the patients who received the PDS-0101 base combination saw a reduction of their tumors in almost 70% of these patients. And bear in mind, the current state-of-the-art for efficacy in this population of patients is only about 10 to 15%, right? So we report in the first 18 patients, almost 70% efficacy in these patients, with 2 of those patients already showing no evidence of the cancer, right? So this product, one of the key things that I think we have to put into perspective is, as the trial continues to recruit, would we see continued efficacy at these levels? But one of the key reasons why we look at this very difficult to treat patient population is that for these patients who have no standard of care and very few opportunities, even a simple doubling of the efficacy rate from 10 to 15% to 20 to 30% becomes very significant, right? So that's part of the company's strategy in being able to rapidly demonstrate efficacy of the technology and also a rapid path to successful commercialization of these products, right? And this is being applied now to a broader population of solid tumor products.
I want to get a little bit into what the Versamune platform is. My understanding is that it is a nanoparticle-based technology, and that you have found a unique protein that is only exists in the cancerous cell, the metastatic cell. You combine that protein with a nanoparticle, you introduce it into someone's subcutaneous, it's taken up by dendritic cells and essentially primes a T cell response, activating effector cells into active T cells, and they then attack the cancer. And so that's a very, very different technology than what PD-1 or PD-L1 does, which is just a generalized upregulation of the immune system. Is that fair?
That is fair. What the PD-1s and the PD-L1s do, more or less, decamouflage the tumor and make the cancer more visible to the immune system, right? But what's recently been reported is that just decamouflaging the cancer and making it more visible to the army isn't enough. That you have to have a trained army to go in and attack and kill the exposed enemy. What our technology does is the other piece. What our technology does, it's a lipid-based technology, and it's able to get into our lymph nodes. And what it does is it recruits a large number of these T cells to go into the lymph node. And secondly, it's able to present that unique tumor-specific or the cancer-specific protein to the T cells train the T cells to recognize that specific protein as a foreign agent or an enemy. And then it also subsequently arms them so that these T cells are no longer just trained to recognize that cancer, but also well armed to be very highly effective in their killing potency, right? And so these T cells then attack the cancer cells and kill those cancer cells. And so for our combination with Keytruda, for example, we anticipate that Keytruda is going to more or less decamouflage the tumor. PDS-0101 will recruit and train those soldiers to go in and attack and kill the cancer cells. And that's what we believe is happening, resulting in these very effective results that we're seeing in these terminal cancer patients.
And from a clinical strategy, going to patients that have already failed a PD-1 or a PD-L1, you are taking out the observed initial effect of PD-1 because it's already failed. And so when you get an objective response in these second line or third line patients, that's not what would be expected. And it would be very clear that you could attribute that to the Versamune platform.
That is exactly right. And also very importantly, because of the fact that we know now that almost 80% of these patients who go on checkpoint inhibitors will fail checkpoint inhibitor therapy, right? So there is a growing need for technologies or combinations that can actually treat this growing population of cancer patients. And so being able to show that even those who fail checkpoint inhibitors have the potential to respond to this combination, including the Versamune technology that's able to activate and generate those powerful tumor-attacking T cells, becomes extremely important.
Right. So this ultimately moves from third line to second line, potentially to a first line with Keytruda, and it's just a question of getting there clinically.
Actually, we are looking at two arms of patients. The first arm, what we call the checkpoint inhibitor naive, is actually looking at first line because Keytruda has been approved as standard of care for first line recurrent metastatic, right? Not pre-metastatic. So first line recurrent metastatic, Keytruda is standard of care. So that's one of the populations we are actually looking at. And that's why our safety becomes very important, because when you go with first line treatment, typically, if you can demonstrate improvement over the monotherapy or standard of care without compounding the toxicity, that dramatically increases the potential for successful commercialization, right? So we're actually looking at the checkpoint inhibitor naive first line, as well as the checkpoint inhibitor refractory population.
Good. So I want you to note I've corrected myself from yesterday, because the idea that you're turning cold tumors hot is really not accurate here. This is an independent mechanism by which you're priming the immune system to go specifically after the tumors, but the tumors need to be unmasked. And while PD-1 or PD-L1 can do that, they don't have the cytotoxic capability, and so it's very different, right? Because I mentioned another company that was trying to turn cold tumors hot. That's not really what you're doing. Actually, what you're doing is more specific and more targeted.
It's more specific and more targeted. The end result is that the cold tumor will eventually become hot once the T cells start infiltrating and killing the tumors, but it's not dependent on specifically activating that key process of turning the cold tumors hot. It's really activating the immune system, activating the processes that naturally exist within our bodies to much more efficiently detect, activate, and attack those cancer cells.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. I want to do something interesting. I want to pivot to you, Lindsay, to Dr. Rosenwald. You've got a PD-L1 in development. The Fortress model is very interesting. My understanding is that Fortress has about a 32% stake in Checkpoint, and Checkpoint is currently developing cosalibumab. Help me understand, do we need another PD-L1? And what did you think of what Dr. Bedu-Addo was saying in terms of kind of a combination therapy? Because I'll bet in your head the gears are already turning.
Yes, they're turning rapidly. I thought it was a great presentation, Doctor. Very exciting.
Thank you.
First of all, yes, there's always going to be a need for checkpoint inhibitors. As you know, I think currently they're a $30 billion a year market, still growing pretty rapidly. They're not going away. Certainly, they're not curing most cancers, and where they are effective, they're not curing those cancers either in most instances. Combination therapy will be with us in oncology for probably the rest of our lives. Cancer cells are very smart and very nasty and figure out ways to get around every therapy. So it's a problem. So it sounds like a great shot on goal from what I've heard. Regarding our PDL1, so first of all, we own, I think, closer to 20%, but we do get a 2.5% equity dividend each year from the company in order to help find new drug candidates and do other things for the company. And we get a 4.5% royalty when the drug is approved. Currently, we're in clinical trial pivotals for cutaneous squamous cell carcinoma. We'll have top-line data the end of the year, and we'll file the BLA next year. We'll also launch a pivotal non-small cell lung trial before the end of this year. So we're very excited about the asset. It's not a not crowded market. Currently, they're going for about $150,000 for a course of therapy from all the competitors. I think the cost of goods is probably well below $10,000 a year for treatment. So there's a lot of room to be severely discounting. And again, at our market cap, we don't need it to be $1 billion drug right out of the gate to have a huge impact on the company. And yet we think that eventually, with enough indications, it could be $1 billion plus drug.
And, in my background, I was a classic pharma guy, right? So I always looked at market share and I looked at how you build it. And one of the things that I'm acutely aware of is that when the second, third, and fourth therapy comes to the market, it doesn't have that advantage of being the first to the market. But often we get into a price competitive environment. So what I hear you saying is a low cost of goods gives you a lot of flexibility in price, and that you're attacking this with the understanding that, hey, what's it going to take for you to get market share? And that just a little bit of market share, when we're talking about this huge market, translates into a lot of value. Is that right?
Yeah. So everybody has a low cost of goods relative to what they're charging. The difference is, for instance, Merck, which is the king right now of checkpoint inhibitors, has a market cap close to $200 billion, and a lot of that is Keytruda. So they have to be careful about discounting. Our checkpoint subsidiary has a market cap closer to $250 million. We don't need to sell it for $150,000 a year, a huge discount. I'm not saying we will, but I'm saying that is certainly an option, would be very meaningful to patients and to shareholders. So that way we have ultimate flexibility.
All right, we're going to come back to Fortress. So now let's pivot to Greenwich Life Science. And Snehal, it took me a little while in our conversation to really think about the company and about what Greenwich Life Science is all about. And it occurred to me that, being diagnosed with cancer is the worst, right? We've had a family experience. But what's almost kind of very tenuous afterwards is not knowing if it's going to reoccur and wishing there was something you could do about it. And whatever you could do about it, you'd like to do it and not have lots of side effects, but kind of reduce your risk. So when we started talking, it occurred to me that what Greenwich Life Science is about is finding a way to reduce the reoccurrence of cancer. And in this case, I think you're talking about HER2, and you'll get into the details with me, breast cancer. What can be done to reduce that reoccurrence rate, and how friendly is that therapy, and how would that therapy fit into the treatment paradigm? Because this is definitely something new. It's a new idea in oncology.
That's correct. So our goal is to actually reduce metastatic breast cancer. So we're on the front end of these other therapies that you've discussed just before mine. So a patient has surgery and they're waiting up to 5 years. They know what their percent chance of recurrence is based on the type of breast cancer they had. And so it's a very anxious period. And if they're HER2 positive, they'll be on Herceptin or Kadcyla. And with Herceptin and Kadcyla, they reduced the recurrence rate in half, but there's still the patients who are going to recur, half of them still recur. And so our product has brought that recurrence rate down to zero. We had no recurrences following 50 treated patients over 5 years. And so that's the excitement that was created with the data that we announced in December last year. And so the goal is you give these 11 injections, 6 primary injections, and 5 boosters. And so that's a total of 11 injections over 3 years. And you sustain your immunity where you have T cells that respond to the HER2 protein, and in particular our peptide GP2. And as the breast cancer comes back, it's metastatic breast cancer, it's deadly, but we're preventing the metastatic breast cancer from coming back. I think that's the easiest way to think about where we fit into cancer immunotherapy.
And we talked a little bit about the historical reoccurrence rate. You said that you had no reoccurrence in the active arm. Can you talk a little bit about how the active arm compared to historical and what the next step is clinically for you?
Sure. So we had 100% disease-free survival or 0% recurrences in the treated arm. And in the placebo arm, which was, so both arms had Herceptin in the year prior. So in the placebo arm, we gave them GM-CSF as a placebo, and it has no effect, but we gave it for other reasons. And so in the end, the placebo arm had 11% recurrence rate or 89% disease-free survival, which tracks perfectly with Herceptin single therapy recurrence rate, which is about 12%. So our placebo did line up with standard of care. And so our goal now is to take that phase 2 trial and reproduce it in a phase 3 trial. So we're on the cusp of starting that trial, hopefully by the 4th quarter of this year. We have the drug product made, it's in vials ready to go. And we have the protocol finished, the statistical analysis plan completed. And now that's being reviewed by the FDA and by clinical sites.
Have you caught the attention of NCI or other oncology leaders? Will you have data at ASCO, at ASH coming up? And how can we follow the progress of this?
Well, what we did last year is we announced our 5-year efficacy data at San Antonio Breast Cancer, and the response was crazy. We went from $5 to $158 within a day. We've settled now at 40, but what we did is also announce data at AACR in ASCO this year. And we have additional data that we want to present. So the next natural conference for us will be San Antonio Breast Cancer again. And we'll just go in this cycle of AACR and ASCO. But as soon as we start the trial, we have open label data that we're going to be able to look at. So we'll be able to report more about immune response in various HLA types in 2022 at AACR or ASCO. So we'll keep the data flow going while we wait for the clinical outcome of the phase 3 trial.
Right. You've clearly caught the attention of the market, right? I mean, it's definitely reflected in your valuation, but, success, what could the potential market for this be?
We think it's over $5 billion. I think the easiest way to look at it is the market for Herceptin and Kadcyla together is $7 to $8 billion for Genentech itself. And so we will be synergistic with Herceptin and Kadcyla. So as Herceptin and Kadcyla grow, we would grow with them. We have the potential to be disruptive also because we're effective with just Herceptin. We don't need Perjeta, Kadcyla, Nerlynx, and HER2 or Tukysa to have this effect. It doesn't mean that those will not be standard of care and that those drugs will not be in our trial. But we have the potential to actually rationalize and de-escalate treatment in the HER2 positive breast cancer space. And lastly, we have the chance to go after the low recurring patients. So the patients who recur at a rate of 1% or 5%. Because if we're as effective as we are in the more severe patients, we have a chance of being effective in those patients where nobody's developing anything. It's almost acceptable to have a low chance of recurrence and to live with that risk. Right? Just like we all face the risk of being infected with the coronavirus, I think these patients will welcome an opportunity to reduce their 1 to 5% chance down to 0 if it's possible.
And one last thing, we talked a little bit about the fact that this is a 9 amino acid sequence. How's your IP on this and on the combination?
Well, we have IP on the composition and the use of GP2 and GM-CSF and with Herceptin. These patents have issued in all the major countries. And we're also a biologic, so we have the 12 years data exclusivity as well.
Okay, perfect. Well, now having done a little bit more work over the last 24 hours, I kind of can appreciate the significance of what you're doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I think you're right on. Based on our prior conversation, I think you're spot on right now.
Good. Thank you.
Sure.
Lindsay, talk with me a little bit, changing the subject away from cancer to other diseases. A Bubble Boy comes to mind. Tell me a little bit about what Fortress is doing with Mustang, and describe for me a little bit about what is the Fortress model. I mean, you have a percent ownership we talked about in Checkpoint, and I'm sure what is the Fortress model, and how is it that you're participating with all these other companies? And then specifically, what are you doing with Mustang?
So the Fortress model is to take advantage of close to $500 billion a year worth of life science R&D all over the world. We have a 22-person search and evaluate team, full and part-time, and that's growing pretty rapidly. We look for drug candidates that are in the clinic that look like they have meaningful efficacy, that we can get on reasonable terms, or that are available. They need a proof of concept in humans, but that proof of concept would not be a long or expensive trial. Also, as you know, we buy marketed dermatology products, and we have a company that's doing very well in the derm business. The idea is there's lots of great programs out there. It's a very, very inefficient market. We certainly at Fortress don't have the budget. Nobody does to develop everything. So we have partner companies that pick up most of the R&D expenses. We stay involved with these partner companies. We have equity at the beginning. We get royalties with most of them. We get eventually each year we get a 2.5% stock dividend each year from most of these companies. So that incentivizes us to grow the Fortress ecosystem, build our search and evaluate team. We keep bringing in more and better high quality people here. And, that's how in a matter of about 6 years, I think we've done 56 transactions. We've acquired 11 marketed dermatology products, of which we're currently marketing 7. And then we've done 45 development stage programs. We have, I think, 18 clinical programs, almost 25 clinical trials, 4 pivotal trials, another 4 coming shortly. So it's a great business. We get economics on each of these, and it's substantial economics. And I do have to say real quick, your calculation of intrinsic value, we should go through it. I think it's a little bit too low. But again, we don't need to do that calculation now. But again, the idea is that we've got this great, I think we have 14 partner companies now. And it's just a great business model. It's a very hard business model. You don't have time to do anything except eat and sleep, but I love what I do. And that's why I do it.
Yeah, and then regarding the intrinsic value, if I took the non-consolidated number out, it ends up being around 250. But the point is that Fortress is a very complex story, and I think the complexity, a lot of people just don't appreciate the scope and breadth.
Yes, so I've spent a little bit.
Let's talk about Mustang.
Yeah, sure. So Mustang, that is a biotech company up just outside of Boston on the University of Massachusetts campus. It is an ex vivo lentiviral cell processing technology. That's just a way of taking cells out of the human body, sending it to our laboratory. We then put in a different gene and send it back to the patient. So several years ago, one of our crack BD people, search and evaluate people, found at St. Jude's in the NIH a gene therapy for Bubble Boy. Bubble Boy is a rare disease, genetic disease, where children are at birth, they do not have a functioning immune system. Their white blood cells don't work. It's a single gene defect. Historically, up until 30, 35 years ago, they passed away within a few weeks or months of birth because they had to be in a bubble, because any infection, they couldn't fight it, they would die. Then hematopoietic stem cell transplants came in, certainly not a cure for most of these kids. Some still die right away. Others do well for a time, but it seems like their grafts eventually fail. This was a drug when we bought it, again, fit right into our scheme of doing business, which is, number one, the data was spectacular. It had been in over a dozen patients with incredible efficacy and tolerability. They were not looking for a partner, yet we convinced them to partner with us. And we put it into Mustang because we happen to already have an ex vivo lentiviral cell processing company. Who has that in their portfolio? And then a couple of years ago, we found an anti-CD20 autologous CAR T at the Fred Hutch Cancer Center that, when they started using our cell processing technology, has shown incredible efficacy and tolerability. Two major markets in the NHL, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and chronic lymphocytic leukemia space. First of all, when you look at the autologous anti-CD19 CAR Ts that are selling very well for Novartis and Gilead and Bristol Myers, we believe that we compete favorably against those due to some improved toxicity levels. So we think that this could be a huge drug for Mustang and for Fortress. We'll soon be in pivotal trials for all three programs.
Great job.
It's technology leverage and people leverage. And again, we don't invent anything. We just look for everybody else's stuff.
So anybody who's interested in Fortress, you can go to the Dawson James website, www.dawsonjames.com, pull down our Fortress reports. We're sporting a buy rating and a $24 price target. That price target has not changed in the 2 years I've been covering Fortress. Lindsay, you got to meet my price target so I can change it, okay? I know, from my lips to God's ears, right? You got it. Dr. Bedu-Addo, can you take 2 minutes or a minute and a half and just kind of close with us on what PDS Biotech's future looks like?
Well, I think the future for PDS Biotech, I think, is extremely bright based on the preliminary data that has been generated. We are certainly very optimistic. I think the proof of principle or proof of concept of actually being able to recruit and train these T cells in vivo, I think, has become quite clear based on the data that was generated. And our goal is to expand beyond just HPV. As I mentioned, we're actually looking at all types of HPV-associated cancer, so broadly targeting the HPV cancer space. But what we're doing by the middle of next year is to go beyond HPV-associated cancer into prostate, breast, and MUC1-associated cancers like lung, colon cancer, for example. And so really, we think the future for the company is extremely bright based upon the preliminary data that has been generated. I mentioned we are currently doing work with the NCI in our with some of our pipeline products to really identify what the right combination strategy should be, and then take those products also into the clinic. And in terms of the addressable markets, as you and the audience are very well aware, this is multi-billion-dollar markets. And being able to really select the specific targets that we address first, just based not only on need, but also market size, is one of the key things that PDS Biotechnology is doing. So what we anticipate doing is, over the next several months, really notifying the markets as we meet those milestones of generating more data. In the 3 clinical trials that are currently running, we're going to have a very busy 3 to 9 month period, because we expect data from all 3 trials coming out during this 3 to 9 month period. And of course, by the middle of next year, expanding beyond HPV cancer also.
Good. So Peter Delta Sally Bravo, PDSB is going on my ticker screen. I'll be watching and look forward to kind of talking with you more as the company starts to release data. Snehal Patel, Greenwich Lifesciences, newly public, but clearly you've caught the attention of the marketplace. Close with us a little bit about what investors should be looking at over the next year.
Sure. So we will be starting our phase 3 trial. And so you'll be hearing about the manufacturing and the enrollment of the first patient. We have more data from the phase 2 trial that we'd like to publish. So hopefully it will be at another major conference, whether it be at the San Antonio Breast Cancer Conference coming up in December, or the AACR conference in April. And then as we start the phase 3 trial, we have lots of data that's going to come out along the way. So it's not as though we have to wait. So the phase 2 trial was 5 years. There's a perception that we have to wait 5 years for more data from Greenwich. That's not true. It's going to be a 4-year trial, but we'll do an interim analysis, so we'll look at it midway. So between now and the midway point, there's many open label features of this phase 3 trial that will allow us to report data that's very meaningful, that talks about expanding the market and how the drug is working in a phase 3 trial without disclosing the final efficacy and primary endpoint. But there'll also be other phase 2 trials and phase 3 trials that we can pursue. So our story is not complete. The jury is out on whether we can reproduce this trial, but we're focused and committed to doing that.
Okay, sounds great. Greenwich Life Science, Golf Lima, Sally, India, GLSI, really, interesting story. And I'll tell you, anybody who's had breast cancer wants to be paying attention to this, although I think I understand that this has implications much bigger than that. And so I'd like to thank our companies. Thank you very much for allowing me to be the moderator. I learn so much every time I do this. People tell me I'm smart, but it's not that I'm smart. It's that I get to listen to really smart people and kind of pull the strings and just see where it leads me. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much. Brent, we'll turn it back to you.
Excellent conversation, gentlemen, and thanks for hosting. Again, Jason, you did a fantastic job.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, guys.
Later, gentlemen.